What if I told you that you were operating at 40% of your full capability? And in fact, over the past 5 years, we've learned more about our brains than we have over the entire span of the existence of humankind. And what if I took it a step further and said that you could reprogram yourself to be happier and healthier? In this video, I'm gonna be talking about how to unlock your mind's full potential. Welcome back to the show, everybody. Christian here, co-founder of WeAreNoCode, and this channel is dedicated to empower the next generation of non-technical founders. So we give you tricks and tips on how to build businesses leveraging no-code technology. We talk about tech, we talk about mindset, we talk about neuroscience, everything that you're interested in, you'll find it on this channel. That's not true, we don't do everything. But hey, I was inspired to create this video because I think in entrepreneurship, people really undervalue everything that's going on below the surface. And I watched a video from Dr.Dispenza. He is a best-selling author who has written You Are the Placebo amongst a long list of other best-selling books that are under his name. He is specialized in the cross-section between neuroscience, epigenetics, and quantum physics. And he's done extensive research into meditation and found some very interesting things. So this video is dedicated on unveiling some of that. In a lot of his teachings, what he talks about is the difference between the mind, the thoughts through your mind, and your body. So the mind is actually your conscient thought process, and your body is the unconscious thought process that often is way more powerful in guiding our decision-making and emotions. Now, a lot of us are familiar with the mind, our conscious thought process, which is basically the voice in your head that constantly sends you thoughts. Those could be positive thoughts, they could be negative thoughts. We know that it's constantly going and it's very difficult to turn off. But the first thing I wanted to do was to explain the body and how he describes the body as the unconscious thought process. Basically, similarly to the way that we develop these sort of muscle memory, that's what we call it, as we perform tasks, as we go through experiences, we essentially live through experiences, traumas, positive experiences, which shape our view of the world. And what our minds are really good at is taking the information from the past to determine and predict the future. Now, as people go through their daily routines, maybe waking up in the morning and browsing social media, getting through some envy, going through thought patterns that essentially are very similar, those thought patterns that are oftentimes just hardwired into your physical body tend to guide the way that we feel emotion. So you might be looking on social media, you see someone who's doing way better than you, and you get triggered. And what it does is that it creates an emotion. And so when that thought comes, your body automatically remembers a past moment when it felt terrible that's linked to that, and it brings back that emotion, which further amplifies the problem itself, and it creates a negative loop where that thought actually creates the emotion, which then triggers behavior, which then brings us back to a negative experience, which creates another negative thought. So it's kind of a self-filling loop, and what happens is that it creates an actual neural pathway in your brain. So that is hardwired in you, and that's something that happens completely unconsciously. So ultimately, we are being just controlled by the way that our mind interprets what is happening by taking bad moments of the past and bringing them into the present. And then it basically triggers an emotion to come up because you have an emotional reaction. It is a neural pathway that was created in the past that's linked to that. And we get back into the place where we feel like we have to do fight or flight. Now, this defense mechanism is incredibly important in nature, or at least it used to be. For example, if you were in a situation where you were being attacked by a tiger, you would essentially, that mechanism would kick in. And then as soon as you were in safety, it would calm down. Same thing with a deer being chased by a predator, right? However, if we're in this state all the time, which is what's happening in society now because you're on social media, then you sit next to someone at work who might cause you an incredible amount of stress, maybe your boss is stressing you out as well, then that is constantly on, and that anxiety is actually proven to transform into sicknesses over time. And that's because the hormones of stress and anxiety down-regulate your genes and create long-term effects like diseases. And the funny thing about your body or unconscious is that it is trying to constantly get to a familiar chemical state, which means that if over time you've trained yourself to have an emotional response to a thought or to an event happening, and suddenly you want to change that, then what's going to happen is that your body is going to really push back. And the place where this is important to understand is that when you are trying to change or break out of these usual patterns, then what your body does is that it sends thoughts to be able to bring you back to that familiar chemical state. And that's where excuses might come up. So it's like, oh, I'll start that tomorrow, or you start getting thoughts of, I'm not good enough to be able to do this. And it actually has a huge impact on us as humans because we're being fed these thoughts that are not necessarily based on our mind, but they're already programmed for our unconscious or our body. And so the big question is, how can you fight back these thoughts that your body is delivering to you to really get out and get you back into status quo? And so the tool that Dr. Dispenza talks about to solve this is actually meditation. Because what happens is that when you train your body to sit still and you start letting your mind go off, it is bringing you in all these different directions, and you start becoming aware of the thought patterns. And as soon as you become aware of the thought patterns, you are essentially able to do triage, which means that not every single thought that goes through your mind is useful. But if you're aware that that thought is coming, you can actually change the outcome because you don't have to feel the associated emotion that's going to trigger the associated behavior, the associated response, the chemicals that come with it, and suddenly you start having more control. So he talks about this in the same way that you would literally just train a dog to sit. And so as soon as you're one step above the thoughts, that is called metacognition. And it's when you're able to not get controlled directly from those thoughts, you start checking each one of your thoughts and then giving it the appropriate amount of response. So that's why often in meditation, they talk about just looking your thoughts pass by you. It's really about the awareness that starts changing the actual neural connections in your brain, and those pathways are rebuilt. And so he did a study where he measured over 7,500 gene expressions in a group of people over a 4-day period while they were meditating. And what he found was incredible. 8 of the common genes were upregulated. 2 of those genes were to suppress cancer cells and tumor growth. 2 of those genes were also upregulated that are genes that are responsible for neurogenesis, which is actually the creation of new neurons from new experiences or learning. Another one of those genes was responsible for bringing T cells to damaged areas in your body, also upregulated, as well as the gene responsible for oxidative stress. They started to see the upregulation of all of these genes that are incredibly powerful and healthy. They started seeing them flourish. They also did another study about meditation that looked at a group of people who were meditating for 60 days. To be exact, they were meditating 5 out of 7 days of the week for a 60-day period. And so they were looking at the length of telomeres. These determine your biological age. And they found that in 74% of cases, those telomeres were getting longer, meaning that your biological age was getting longer as well. So essentially 10% more means 10% more life, which is absolutely fascinating. And so the reason why I wanted to talk about all of this is because as founders, we have to deal with a huge amount of stress, of anxiety, of hard work, and oftentimes we can have negative self-talk, we can have a lot of doubt, and we can use positive thoughts to rewire our brain, make ourselves happier and healthier. This entire channel is all about that, teaching people who are wanting to be entrepreneurs, specifically non-technical people, how to build their companies. And health and wellness has a huge impact on that because nothing works unless you do. Thanks so much for joining. Slam that subscribe button, like this video, share it with someone who could use it, and I'll see you in the next video. You have an amazing day.